My name is Dr. Richard Ledet. I'm an assistant professor at Troy University. The views that I'm about to share with Pete and John are my own views. They are not the views of my university. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please direct them to me and not my administration.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John and Pete.
Well, that means we're going to get the goods from Dr. Rich Ledet, and thank you for joining us.
Yes.
We've had quite a week. Here in California, we passed recreational use marijuana law. We passed a gun bill that includes many hardy restrictions that will affect the way that law-abiding gun owners have to enjoy their rights, and will do, in my view, absolutely nothing for the non-law-abiding gun owners. And we are really, really good at that.
Yes.
We also, as a country, pushed the Electoral College to elect one Donald Trump to be our president, to be inaugurated at the beginning of next year. So we want to talk with you today, Dr. Ledet, about a number of those things. And I went in reverse order of priority because the first thing we want to talk to you about is the presidential race. Do you mind if we jump into that topic?
Not at all.
Oh, I want to interject, too, that we also did not pass a law that would have required porn stars to wear condoms.
We're going to let them regulate themselves.
That's right. by a narrow margin, I must say. But anyway, getting back to the election of the president, we are in a place, and I want to start with we're in a place where we're seeing more and more that the popular vote is betrayed by what the Electoral College is going to do. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, in my lifetime, I've seen Al Gore win the popular vote and not get the presidency, and now we just saw. They're still counting ballots,
yeah.
And Hillary Clinton is still racking them up. By last count, she's almost 2 million votes ahead of the Don.
And they're not finished counting California.
No, and that's more than likely only to add more votes to Secretary Clinton. So we'll see how it turns out. But I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we do have this thing called a Constitution, and that Constitution says that we don't elect our presidents by popular vote. We actually have an indirect election, and it is that thing called the Electoral College, which is mostly a formality these days. We don't vote for our president. We vote for a slate of electors who I think next month they get to cast their votes. So in theory, you could have some electors that defect from the party, and they could, in theory, vote for Hillary. I don't see that happening, but in theory it could. And most states actually have laws that bind the electors to the pledges that they made to the party. But, rarely do we see electors defecting. So, but yes, you're right. We saw it in 2000. Al Gore won, and Hillary Clinton won. But you will not see Al Gore become president, and you did not see Hillary Clinton become president. So,
is this a symptom of our times? We're so polarized, and actually, I don't even know if polarized is the right word anymore. When we're going to have two candidates running in the low to mid 40s in terms of their support. That's kind of fails to meet the standard of polarization. Is this something that's going to continue to happen where the Electoral College becomes better or more predictable than the popular vote?
I'm not sure if the Electoral College has been unpredictable. You can kind of see things, especially towards the end of the campaign. You can kind of see things really start to shift to Trump's direction. There's a few things you could point to there, but I'd back up a little bit, and we had two very unpopular people, and they're both unpopular for different reasons. But we had two very unpopular people running. So I do think that both the parties really dropped the ball because Bernie Sanders could have won. John Kasich could have won. And those two names those were my picks from the get-go, because I thought Sanders represented what I thought the Democratic Party represented. And I thought Kasich was, out of all the people on that stage, he was the more moderate Republican. Because I don't think you can govern Ohio like a jerk for too long. You've got to kind of play middle of the road. Ohio's got a good mix of rural and urban, good mix of educated, uneducated, a lot of different kind of workers. So that's why I really liked Kasich early on. But we did see the reality TV star work the media over. So
he sure did. He worked the hell out of the media. And the thing about that is that we have entered a day and age where your ability to work the media is not just important, but the most important thing. Because that's where everybody sees you, and that's how everybody sees you. And nowadays, you can have the best platform, the best plan, and the best really forecast for what our country is going to do and what our country is going to need. And that is all meaningless if you can't communicate to a number of voters that you are their guy.
Or gal,
as the case may be, and
well, because if you, I think looking at the two candidates on paper, I think one was clearly more experienced in government and qualified to actually be the president. But that didn't matter. It didn't seem to matter.
Well, and I think that the fact that she won all of the urban areas everywhere, even in the states that she lost, she won the urban areas. And by urban, I don't mean black, because nowadays the word urban means black to a lot of people. But what I mean is the commercial centers in a given state all went to her.
And I would add, that's not just the commercial centers. This is where most of your colleges are. Mm-hmm. This is where most of the work is. But the Electoral College, as it turns out, since that's how it sides, it really tends to favor states that are more rural in this particular election. But I think that was also by design early on. Our founding fathers were very, very, and I'll go back to some founding father stuff here. I know we were talking about the media, and I would like to jump back on that. But to get back to the Electoral College issue, our founding fathers did not want Joe and Jane Citizen picking the president. That's why they put the Electoral College in there in the first place. Our founding fathers were fearful of populism. They were fearful of direct democracy. So that's why we've got an indirect means of electing the president. But, we're also not 13 colonies anymore. We're not 13 colonies dominated by white male Protestants. Here in 2016, we've got a much different electorate. It looks much different than it did early on, and that electorate has been changing for quite some time. Early on, you had to be white, male, and own property to vote. Eventually, the 14th Amendment got rid of the, slaves are 3/5 of a person, and now male former slaves can vote. It was the 17th Amendment that made the election of senators a popular decision, because we used to elect our senators according to the state legislature's decisions. And the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote, and we eventually in the 70s gave people under the age of 21 the right to vote. So we've seen over the course of 200 plus years, we the people are different. And we the people, we who gets to vote has changed greatly.
It's become more of a democracy, and not to betray the fact that we are still a republic, but it was much more of a republic because we chose, in essence, our, let's say, heads of household to represent our households and to go out and vote the people who would represent our interests in state legislatures, who would then vote the folks who would represent our interests on a national level. So it is a little more democratic with a small d than it is Republican with a small r.
Yeah, I like to remind my students often that you got to be real careful when you use that word democracy. Mm-hmm. We've got democratic political processes, but that word democracy means there's a lot of different types of democracy. Democracy could take many different forms.
Right. And when I say the word republic with a small r, I mean a representative democracy, which means that we do vote, but we vote for people who we hope will represent our interests and vote the way we would want our laws to be created and enforced and all that. So does that mean that now more of us get to vote? But we've gotten to a place where I think that spirit, along with the enhancement of media in our lives and all of that, has made it so that my opinion, and I'm speaking with my own political leanings, and for anybody who doesn't know, when it comes to certain things like personal rights, I lean to the right. When it comes to things like social responsibility and tolerance for other people, I lean to the left. And I'm in California, grew up in California with California political sensibilities, and I know that. But I feel like an educated urban, or let's say an educated viewpoint, counts for a vote, but an uneducated rural opinion also counts for the same vote. And I don't know that all of this democratization has necessarily done right by us.
Well, let me go back first and talk about the media, and then I would like to touch on that word you just used, democratization. So the thing about the media is we've got a lot of choice in media, but we also don't have a lot of choice. At the end of the day, the media encompasses many different things, but for the most part, we're looking at a corporate endeavor. You know, media, they have shareholders that are looking for profits.
Yeah.
You know, so
news is no longer a lost leader like it was when Walter Cronkite was delivering it.
You know, whenever the guy running CNN says Donald Trump may not be good for America, but he's certainly good for CNN. Yep. You know, there's something to think about. When the guy who used to run Fox News gets pushed out for sexual harassment and then immediately goes to work for Donald Trump, right? You know, that really looks bad, doesn't it? You know,
not to some people.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But, you know, the thing is we get to pick and choose, and we really get to sit in our own little media bubbles, you know. So we don't just have, you know, 3 broadcast stations anymore and, you know, with a PBS on the side. We can isolate ourselves and build our own little media bubble. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure that's helping create an informed electorate. What it does is it reinforces people's pre-existing beliefs, you know.
Right.
And that I think is very dangerous. But, you know, there's some theories about citizenship and what it takes for a person to be a good citizen. And I've actually got published research on what it means to be a democratic citizen. And the idea of democratic citizenship requires that a person is tolerant towards other people's civil liberties. Person's got to be active in government and active in political affairs. But the third component is that you must be knowledgeable. And the problem with knowledge these days is it's not just information, it's also a lot of misinformation.
Yep.
And misinformation is the belief in false facts and, you know, things that are just verifiably not true that people believe to be accurate. And I think that you had a lot of that driving members of the electorate, more on one side than the other, and I'll let your listeners figure out who I'm talking about.
I'm going to clarify it for them. Please continue.
Here's an example for you. I spent 8.5 years in graduate school, and not a single member of my family even bothered to ask me anything about this past election, not just to get my thoughts, but nobody even bothered to, hey, I saw this on so-and-so's Facebook post. Is this true?
Right.
But what I did see is a lot of reposting of things that were verifiably not true.
Yep.
And that's painful to me because I'm in the business of educating. And, you know, when people just refuse to believe things that are verifiably true, well, I really don't know what to do with that. You know, I can call it willful ignorance, but if all you do is get the same news from the same source, you're not going to be able to figure out anything that approximates the truth. So the example I give, and again, this is something I use to my students, is, and I know, Pete, you've looked at a topographical map before, you've played around with a compass.
Yes.
If you're lost and you can't find your way, you must triangulate. And if you've got a map, if you've got a compass, if you've got a ruler, and you can find 2 positions on that map that you can see with your eyes, well, you can triangulate and figure out where you are. So I don't think a lot of citizens are doing that. What they're doing is they're looking at one point and they're following that point. Meanwhile, they're just lost. They have
where they think they are is in an informed place.
But and that gets to the overall social media thing that happens. Like Facebook, for example, you'll see these postings, these memes, that kind of thing. And then there'll be one meme that'll say, President Obama did terrible, and here are the facts, right? And then there'll be the exact opposite meme where, congratulations, Mr. President, great job. My belief is the same company makes that because they want that. It's like a BuzzFeed thing where the more it gets shared, the more ad revenue they can drive. So literally, instead of being some kind of political information system, it's just a thing to create buzz, and that buzz becomes fact. And in reality, it's not really based on any kind of definitive, like how can you make your decision on a president based on a meme? You can't.
But many did.
But many people do, and many people did.
And then when you orient, and the source of your orientation is young conservatives or Occupy Democrats, like you are taking something that you know is corrupted in terms of educating yourself and saying this is a point of bearing for me from now on. You know, like the young conservative, of course it's written to one lean or the other. You can't accept just that. So how do you find a more neutralized mountaintop to intersect or re-intersect from?
Well, first of all, you got to be willing to look for it. You know, you've got to be open-minded enough to recognize, and this is where the ideal of democratic citizenship comes in, is you've got to be active. You've got to be active in trying to get good information. You've got to be educated enough to know what validity is in the news and in the media. You have got to be willing to actually address something with an open mind, right? And I'm not saying everybody's got to be a social scientist out there, but what we need to do is recognize that our news sources themselves might be corrupted, and not just liberal versus conservative or Republican versus Democrat, but this is the media trying to make money. This is clickbait out there. Right. Click on this, so we can generate some advertising revenue. I mean, you had kids in Macedonia just generating memes and generating this clickbait stuff. So, that's, I think nowadays, that's the real danger. This was not to influence our election. This was, a company that was recruiting people, and it was simply to make money, And
the problem is you had kids in Missoula who were looking at these memes and deciding how to vote. Here's what I think, and it's a pessimistic view, and I try not to have too many pessimistic views, but I think this one is actually realistic and pragmatic, and I want you to talk me down from the cliff if you think I need to be talked down from the cliff. But
oh, be careful. I might jump right off with you.
Well, I don't think that it's going to happen. I don't think that our citizenry is naturally going to get smarter. I think that the ignorant are going to have to die off, and hopefully those who have an open mind actually seek out fact and keep an objective look. I feel like I need to launch a disclaimer, and I will say that I did not vote for Trump, and I did not vote for Trump not because of any, I'm really very right-leaning in many ways and left-leaning in other ways, and I gave it an objective look, and I did not want him to represent. I did not want the thing that he campaigned about, if I can generalize it all in one ball, to be what represented the United States of America to the rest of the world, and I did that based on what I thought to be fact-based analysis and objective information. And because I think he won the media and he won the dullards, who voted for him because he was their guy, not based on anything resembling a plan, I think that we're going to have to outlive the dullards. Now, that having been said, he's been elected president, and when he swears in as president, if he walks in the room, you know what I do? I stand the fuck up because he's the president. And I respect the office, and I respect the way the people have spoken. And I don't mean that in just I'm in a march in line kind of way, but the country has spoken, and he rang a chord that resonated with a lot of people, and so we deserve to have him.
As another aspect, too, why you stand the fuck up, that guy is taking on the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
You were constantly picking the least shitty of all the shitty options.
Yep.
And that is just the fact that he's willing to do that, I don't want that job.
No.
You know,
I couldn't take
I
it.
want to stand up and say, hey, man, thanks. You may be the most fucked up person in the world.
But you took it.
Yeah, and you got a lot of smart people around you, and I don't want
Good
to
luck.
Yeah. Holy shit.
Well, we hope that he puts smart people around him, because it's not just who the president is, it's who the president appoints.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about the environment. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and we got to have clean air, we got to have clean water. And when you tell me that you're going to dismantle the Environmental Protection Agency, now they're not perfect, but it's something. And now I have to basically rely on the state of Alabama to regulate the emissions coming from that lead processing plant up the road. There's also a plastics recycling plant up the road. I've got to rely on the state of Alabama if we dismantle the EPA. I'm not so sure I can trust this state to do that. The other thing is you talked about education, and I know you want to say the dummies versus the non-dummies, because that's what I want to say. But I'm a public educator, so I'm dealing with a lot of first-generation college students. I have college students who, a lot of them can't even write a complete sentence, much less write a research paper. And that's because the education system that they come from is one of the worst in the country. And I'm saying that, and I was educated in public school in Louisiana. But at least by our nation's last report card, Louisiana even did a little bit better than the state that I'm in now. I mean, even our governor a couple of weeks ago said the education system sucks. Those are his words, not mine. So another one of Trump's plans and people around him is to get rid of the Department of Education. So I'm just wondering who's going to make up the Pell Grant money that the public school that I teach at benefits from. So while I am sympathetic to the waiting for the dummies to die off, that's not going to happen anytime soon. But at the same time, if we're not educating our public, and it's not just educating them with how the government works and who your leaders are, but we need to know the process, but we also need to understand things like the Electoral College and the role that it plays. We also need to understand the amendment system. I know there's a lot of dummies out there saying we need to get rid of the Electoral College. Do you know what it takes to amend the Constitution?
Yes.
Yes,
I do.
I don't think that's
idea.
That's happening anytime soon. I also don't think it's necessary, really. What we need to do is get our heads out of our asses. Anyway, sorry for the interjection.
No, but let me again, before we get too deep, before we continue down this road, you talked about the idea of democratization. Now that might mean a little bit something different to me. But I think where we have, and this is the conservative coming out in me, man, I think that there's a lot that can be done at the state level, in terms of states' rights. And we keep pointing our finger at Obama for the economic problems. But what about our members of Congress?
Yes.
Not just members of Congress, but what about our state legislature?
So that brings up a great point, and we kind of danced around a little bit.
And I'm a states' rights guy. I want to throw that out there for the folks on the right who are like, God damn it, this
I would like the rights to be
lefty.
pushed as far down the process as possible.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's take care of these things down here. So for sure, I agree with that. And let's be clear, there are dullards across the board.
On both sides.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're not picking a side on that. And then you said
picking a side a little bit.
You said a very, well...
John and Pete.
Hey, everybody, if you like the Break It Down show,
I can dig it.
And of course you do.
Of course you do. Hit that subscribe button.
John and Pete.
It helps us out.
Hey, if you're going to like the show on Facebook or on Twitter, it helps us out if you share the show so people can learn about it. So liking it is great. Sharing is even better.
Let's do some spy stuff.
Yeah,
let's get all our friends' phones and have them subscribe to the Break It Down show. Do it. Subscribe. Listen to the show. If you love the show, tell 5 of your friends. Or if you hate the show, tell 5 of your friends.
Look, we all forget all that stuff. We've set a very low bar as far as what a democratic citizen is supposed to do. You said
that's the problem.
3 things.
Yeah,
and we're not meeting that bar.
We're not.
But
we're not. And there are 3 easy things, people.
Get beyond just an opinion. Be able to be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't understand and see, like I talked to a guy and I said, not voting is a vote. And that's fair.
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's because you're lazy or you don't care. It's like, well, all right. I already know military people that don't, specifically because they don't want to influence the decision or in a state that they don't reside in right now because they're abroad.
Yeah.
And they also don't want to pick a commander in chief because they feel like that's not a fair position to put themselves in because they're picking for their personal benefit.
Right. And their service to the people is a genuine desire to serve the people.
Right. And so he says, and I said, so you need to understand there's more than one view on reasons why you don't vote and why not voting is a vote. And
Colin Kaepernick's reason was bullshit. I'm just saying that. Anyway, go ahead.
But there are reasons that people
Sure.
choose to not vote. Sometimes it's whatever, laissez-faire kind of attitude. But there are reasons. He can't accept that. He can't reason through the things like, no, it's just this. Well, that's an unreasonable position.
Yep.
And you haven't educated yourself if you can't accept the fact that there are people that legitimately said, I can't in good conscience vote for a liar or a bad person. And that can be either candidate.
Yep.
So they won't stoop to that level. That is a vote.
That's a vote. Yep.
So we've got to get better at educating ourselves. And what were the other two aspects besides the education? There was the involvement and then something
You got
else.
to be informed. You got to be involved, but you got to be tolerant, right? And tolerant. This is the concept is political tolerance or political intolerance, and it's really a respect for civil rights and civil liberties. Because see, the thing is, I might have my rights, but my rights don't matter if I don't respect yours.
That's right.
And that's where I think a lot of this is.
And that's a way that I cherish my rights, by the way.
Well,
my
you
right
show
extends
respect.
as far as I'm not infringing upon yours. And when mine infringes upon yours, I betray the concept of me having rights.
Yes.
Yeah, you do. And rights and liberties, I think, are not just political. They extend into the marketplace as well. You got a lot of people who don't want to sell wedding cakes to gay couples. That's wonderful. They call that religious liberty, right? Well, there was a time in this country where African Americans couldn't even sit in the same lunch counter, right? So we have to understand that there's a certain amount of respect that comes with the kind of political system that we have grown into.
Yeah.
And that's respect for what other people have, right? Other people's rights and liberties. And if we don't acknowledge that, right? There's no right in the Constitution. Nobody has a right not to be offended.
Yeah.
What you do have to understand is, and I think most Americans don't understand this, that rights are not absolutely just for you. They're also for other people.
Yep.
And the sooner we come to understand that, and I would add, the sooner we stop placing so much emphasis on the federal government and start paying attention to what's happened locally, then I think we would be much better off for it. Because, hey, you guys in California, you like your recreational marijuana. Guess what? That can be taken away from you as soon as Donald Trump takes the office.
Yeah.
Because he's already surrounded himself by a bunch of war on drugs warriors. So your state's rights may not actually mean nothing. And if you paid attention to the party's platforms, the party that we traditionally think of as the party of states' rights, the Republican Party, not when it comes to marijuana. It's the Democratic Party that actually said, let's let the people in these states decide what they want to do.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you why I have a problem with, and like I said, you guys are talking about, hey, we're not choosing one side or the other, and I am choosing a side, and that's one of the reasons. I am a conservative in many, many ways, and I've had this debate with many of my friends who are conservatives. I'm going to point out a guy named Mike Pothier, who is a great guy, very conservative, and he votes to the right on practically everything. But you know what? He loves his family, and I love his family. And he loves, and it's just one of those things where we go, okay, we're going to disagree on a couple of things, but I respect that because I know where you're coming from. And as long as we can continue to do that, we're going to all be in a great place. But where it comes to me not voting for the party on the right, the reason I don't vote that way is because, to their credit, they've gotten really good at winning. And even when the odds are against them, they're really good at winning. And I have to salute that. But they've gotten good at winning because they're willing to say, hey, we're going to take this pool of voters who we can fool, and we're going to fool them. And we're going to bring them over to our side because that creates a little base for us. And then there's the intelligent things that they do. And I go, oh, man, I want to vote for those intelligent things. But I feel like that party's slightly more willing to pull the wool over my eyes. And I don't enjoy that. Is that a fair position?
I think that's a fair position. One thing that we had, you guys and I had thought about discussing was this idea of a mandate. And the thing about the Republican Party is They did something in 2010. They really figured out that they could win state legislatures, and there was going to be a census that would come up. And after that census, we've got to redraw district lines. We've got to reapportion our legislature at the federal level. And they figured out how to give themselves an artificial bump up in the House of Representatives. So while you say they're very good at winning, I say, yeah, they were just really good at redrawing the district lines, and they have secured themselves the House of Representatives at least until 2020. And
if anybody looks at those lines, the redistricting,
Oh boy.
man, it's the definition
geez.
of gerrymandering. Those lines
Well-
are all fucked up. I mean, clearly you're
they
wanting
are.
to include this neighborhood that's going to vote in your favor so that they can, I just want to avoid using the word Trump, but
Yeah.
that's the word. And yeah, they were great at it. They did a great job. And the people for whom whose eyes they pulled the wool over are going, oh, well, that's what we wanted. And so, hey, what can I do?
And let me add this into, so in 2008, we elect President Obama, and there's a lot of excitement. There's supermajorities, and it's going to be a free-for-all. But from what I see, and again, I'm a layman, you're the expert, President Obama overspent his political capital, and there's costs that come from that. So when you use up all your political capital, the Republicans are going to take things back from you. It's a trade. And I imagine that some of this census-based gerrymandering comes from that 2008 time period where there was a lot of advantage taking, especially forcing the Affordable Care Act through the House. And again, I'm not making a political statement. I'm just talking about these things actually happened. So now that Republicans have the ability to say, these things have happened, we have
You got to give us a little something back.
Yeah, we have to regain control. So we're going to come after this gerrymandering, and we're going to own the House for the foreseeable future. Is that
they own the House at least until 2020. I guess I'm just going to push back on you a little bit because Obama I'm not going to say he overspent his political capital, but what I will say is the House of Representatives at that time was Democratic. The Senate was Democratic. And if you go back to Schoolhouse Rocks, how a bill becomes a law, that's how you ended up with the Affordable Care Act. I don't think there was any wool over anybody's eyes on that one, right? That's how the political process works. Well, now we're about to see how it works on the Republican side, right? But, I'm actually, there's a book, the name of the book is called Rat Fucked. And I believe the guy.
We're glad to.
Oh, yeah.
Best
The guy's
title
name
ever.
is David Daly. Oh, I love the title of that book. I've assigned it to my state and local class. It lets me say rat fucked in class every time we talk about the book. It's wonderful. So the guy's name is David Daly, and he's not saying, look, it's just the Republicans. What he does is he points the finger at the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party and all of their, hey, Obama won, let's do awesome things, they forgot about the American public at the state and local level. And that's one reason why all those state houses, because it's the state legislatures in most states that decide how to draw those district lines. Actually, out there in California, you guys let an independent redistricting committee do the bidding. And I believe it was Arnold Schwarzenegger signed it into law. But if I'm not mistaken, if my memory serves me correctly, your Democratic state legislature never wanted it to be independent. It actually had to get passed by an initiative. A ballot initiative is how you guys got your independent redistricting committee. But most states don't allow that. There's a handful of states that do it by an independent committee or a bipartisan committee. But, elections have consequences, and to the victor go the spoils. And in this case, in 2010, what happened was they redrew the district lines. I mean, you had several states. I believe one was Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe, and some of your readers might check me on that. But you had several states that there were more Democrats who came out to vote, but yet more Republicans won seats. How does that happen? It happens because they drew the district lines in their favor, right? But again, a point that I like to make is you're going to end up with more policies that are not what the American public wants. It's going to be what the minority wants, because the Republican Party hasn't, and I'm putting up some air quotes right now, has not fairly won the House of Representatives. They've artificially won the House of Representatives because they got state legislators to draw lines in their favor. Now, this is an example of state elections having a national impact, because all those people in the federal Congress, in the House of Representatives, they were put there by state legislatures who drew the lines in their favor, you know. So, and my concern is that we're just going to have more policies that the majority of the American public doesn't actually want. And it's not just Hillary Clinton is up by almost 2 million votes, right? You've got an artificially constructed House of Representatives right now. And that, I think, is going to end. That's a recipe for bad policy, or at least unpopular policy in the long run.
How does that impact Donald Trump's ability, though, to govern? If the Republicans, he's not really a Republican. Most of them didn't want him. So does he have a mandate, a Republican-based mandate? They barely have a majority. Does his ability to govern through the legislature work?
They've got a nice majority in the House. They've got a slight majority in the Senate. And let's keep in mind that the Senate map in 2018 favors the Republicans, right? But the Republicans in the House are already saying, well, we've got a mandate. We've got a mandate, because they've got all three branches. But they're not going to remind the American public or their voters that they didn't win the popular vote. Yeah. Why would they do that? Here's another thing. Obama was the first president that got over 51% in 2 elections. In fact, before Obama, it was Dwight Eisenhower. I think he did it in 52 and 56. He got over 51%. The Republicans didn't give him a mandate, right? So, but these same Republicans, and this is the House leadership right now, this is Paul Ryan, who said, oh yeah, we've got this mandate, right? But these are some of the same Republicans in the Congress that as soon as Obama was elected, they got together by their little campfire and they said, our mission is to make this a one-term president. That to me is party over country, because he didn't get his mandate, but yet Donald Trump didn't win 50% of the vote, and he's got a mandate. Oh, and by the way, House of Representatives, you're there artificially. So the wool has been pulled over a lot of people's eyes, and you got some very smart dummies in the House of Representatives that are doing it.
Doesn't that same thing hold true for President Bush in his second term? I've got a mandate. I'm going to change Social Security. No, he didn't. You know, everything he tried to do got locked down. So gridlock has been sort of a check and balance effect. Like it's supposed to be. We have Donald Trump. A lot of people don't want Donald Trump. So representatives are going to be looking over their shoulder saying, I'm up for election in 2 years. I'm not hitching my wagon to the Donald Trump train because most of my people don't want that.
Well, we'll see. But the problem is, in each individual House district, because of the way we've drawn the lines, you got a lot of Republican members of the House that can say, nope, this is what my people want. But in the meantime, this is the same party that loves competition in the marketplace, but they don't like competition in politics.
That is hilarious. That's a terrific point.
I'm going to trademark that because, we need to figure out how to make some money. So there you go. We're going to copyright it and trademark that, and we're going to make some money off of that.
Yeah.
I was leaving some space there.
I know, man. Golly.
Well, I don't want to, I don't want to give it all away too soon. My entrepreneurial spirit's telling me I gotta save some.
Let me ask you this. People are freaked out about what Donald Trump is going to do. He's become this racist, xenophobic, philandering problem child. And that might all be absolutely true.
Before you ask this question, Pete, let me just ask, do you think all of that's true?
You asking
Do I?
Yeah, I'm asking both of you. Do you think Donald Trump is really a racist, xenophobe, and all of those things? I mean, we know he's a cad, and he's a son of a bitch, and he likes pussy. But hey,
he likes grabbing it.
Aren't we all? But hey, that's part of the act that got him the media attention that got him elected. Now, do you think that he's going to behave as a different person now that he's been elected? Or do you think that he really did mean all that shit?
Well, I don't know the case. I'd have to go back. But I think Donald Trump in his past has had some civil rights issues. I think there was some federal cases against him about housing, denying African Americans or basically not letting black people rent his properties,
Yeah.
Did everybody see him? I thought it was pretty clear that he insulted the disabled reporter, So he's got some troubles. I think in his past he's got some things that stand out pretty clearly as, and I hate to call anybody racist because heck, I live right off of George Wallace Avenue over here in Alabama.
That's right.
So I really try to be careful about using that word, but I think he's got a long history of not being fair to people who aren't white. I think he's got a history of inflammatory language, and I don't know what's in the man's heart. I can only say this is, you go back to the Bible, from the heart the mouth speaketh, right? So I for fear of retribution here, Donald Trump's death squad's rounding me up. No, he's not a racist, but he sure has a history of racist practices. Is that a fair thing to say? I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, it's certainly fair to question his character.
His sexism is a whole other thing. I think he's pretty obvious there. Grab him by the pussy. That's not what I thought was presidential. So I don't know. Is it all talk? Maybe. But at the same time, I hope that he does what most presidents do, which is try to steer toward the center. But I don't know.
I think we know that it's not all talk,
right?
But there was some degree of talk. That
we have to reason that there's context in this. I mean, the guy is raised in standards that aren't like anybody else's. I mean, he's a rock star. His world is a different world, so he was able to be a cad, because he had other things protecting him. He didn't have the social rules that we all had, so he should look weird to us. Will he behave better now that no shit, you really have the job, and there's a lot of hopefully really smart advisors around him saying, hey, knock that shit off.
Yeah, you can't behave like that.
Right, because you can't just keep firing people, because every time you get rid of the head of the Joint Chiefs, there's another guy behind that person, and they're going to continue to say the same things. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of you, or maybe both of you, said he's not really a Republican. I guess my problem with that is he's a Republican now.
Yeah.
And, that's the way it is. And for all your listeners out there, and don't forget that as soon as Obama took office, you started blaming all the debt on him. So right now, I'm looking at $20 trillion in debt. Yes. That's Trump's debt. So, you can't have it both ways. It's either, you got to hold this man by the same standards of accountability you held Barack Obama. And a lot of people changed the rules, though, from Bush to Obama. And then all of a sudden, Obama's got all these problems. It's Obama's debt. Well, that debt goes back to Reagan. That debt is George H.W. Bush's. Some of that debt's Clinton's debt. Oh, wait a minute. Bill Clinton balanced the budget with the Republicans. They got together, balanced the budget. So let's be fair here. And this is also coming from a person who teaches the executive branch. The president is a lightning rod. That's not my words. That is well-known presidential historian has said that. Stephen Skowronek. The president is a lightning rod. Takes a lot of the heat. So, but the American public, I think, does not have the capacity to be fair, especially when their person doesn't win the presidency. But again, I would say, there's two things I want to say. Let's not forget that the Congress has a role in this too. While we keep blaming the president, let's stop and think, we need to hold Congress accountable. I'm not so sure we're willing to do that. But also the second thing is, are we willing to hold Donald Trump to the same standard of accountability that we held the last president? And I'm not so sure that Americans are willing to do that, because for the most part, we've all picked sides before the election.
You know what? If I may interject, to that point, regarding our willingness to blame Congress, I think this goes back to the informed voter. I don't think that as a country we're willing to blame Congress, but I also think that as a country, there are enough people out there who don't know with their stupid asses that Congress has a part in this that's worth blaming. So a lot of the people who said, well, I voted for, either side. If you ask them, who's your congressperson? They would go, So, this is my big problem. We have a lot of fucking shitheads voting. And if you don't know who your congressperson is, dear listener, you're a fucking shithead. Go find out who your congressperson is. And that's not me being
let me help
vitriolic toward my listeners, but we value
holding
your
them
listening.
accountable.
Yes, we value your listenership. Clearly, because you listen to this show, you have an intellectual capacity that allows me to challenge you. Go find out who your congressperson is, and let's start spreading it around.
Let me grab your hand and jump off this cliff with you.
Okay.
Because
I thought you were going to grab me by the pussy.
No, I'm not going to grab you by the pussy. My kid's watching. So
okay.
So here's the thing. I'm part of my research right now. I'm interviewing members of the clergy, and I was having this really nice interview with a member of the clergy, very well-educated man. He had several degrees on his wall. I'm in his office. We're chit-chatting it up, and I had already turned off. The interview was complete, but I'm giving him a chance to interview me, and we're talking back and forth, and we're having a great conversation. And I mentioned the names of our 2 senators and our representative from the district, and he looked at me and he said, "Rich, I need to stop you for a minute because you mentioned some names, and I don't know who any of those people are." And I was floored. I had to, having done a little bit of training on body language, and I had to basically grab myself, and I cannot believe that this man of faith who is a minister, has a couple hundred people in his congregation, does not know. And oh, by the way, he had a whole lot to say about Obama.
Sure.
But this man did not know who his 2 senators and who his representative was. So yeah, there you go. I'm right off this cliff with you, brother.
Yeah.
Let me also say about members of Congress, this is why we need to hold Congress accountable. Pete and I have talked about this before. Why in the world does a member of Congress get to look at a general and tell a general what a general needs to wage war? We don't need no more M1 Abrams tanks. Well, maybe we do now for this, massive land grab that Russia's going to go ahead and participate in. But why in the world a couple years back are members of Congress looking at generals in the Army, and the generals are saying, we don't need no more Abrams? What does the member of Congress say? You need more Abrams.
The member of Congress who says, we build those in my district.
Yeah,
you need more of those
in my district. And here's the other thing, that a lot of people are so pissed off at that $20 trillion in debt. But you know what? It ain't just Obama's. It ain't just W. Bush's, right? It is those members of Congress who are not balancing the budget. Because if you go and you pull out your handy-dandy, trusty Constitution, who has the power of the purse? It is the Congress. So, there you go.
Dr. Rich, tell us again the 3 things that allow a citizen to meet the requirements of a democracy. It was
this political science research, and if you guys want some citations for your more informed listeners, I can provide some of those for you after the show. A democratic citizen must be informed, must be active, but also must be tolerant. Informed, active, and tolerant.
So this is where you have to look internally at yourself, and we all throw the words idiot and bigot around and call people shitheads and stuff. But you've got to reflect back.
I do.
Yeah, and it's okay. I mean, that's part of the process. But if you're going to protest, Pete would say, protest, that's great, but make sure you send off that email to your congressperson and say, I don't want you to support Donald Trump, or whatever it's going to be that you're going to say. Don't just go out and go on TV and get arrested and all those things. Participate. Let your representative know that you're out there in more than one way.
That's the active part.
Right. Be active. For sure, be educated. Listen. Have the ability to reason. If you aren't able to see someone else's point, you don't have to agree. But you have to be able to say, that's reasonable. It's reasonable that people didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton because she's dishonest in a lot of ways. A lot of us see her as that. That's reasonable.
I have plenty of friends who did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton because they saw her as dishonest. And I absolutely tolerated that point of view and shared it in a number of ways. And I appreciate their passion on the subject.
Yes.
But the last part was, you said you had to be informed, you got to be active, and you have to be tolerant. So let's all be tolerant of each other. But I want to go back to informed, because informed doesn't mean, man, I watch a whole lot of Fox News. And I'm picking on Fox News because, I don't like Fox News.
Oh, it's easy.
But I could
they make it so easy.
they do make it so easy. But what I really mean to say is that Get out of your silo of information and be willing to understand what's on the other news sources, and be willing to embrace the ones who have actual facts.
You know, I think that, like the whole Hillary Clinton's a liar and she's dishonest. Like, I've heard that from so many people, but it's like, look at the other guy though.
Yeah, right.
Like you won't vote for her because look at Trump. You won't vote for her because she's dishonest, but I'm sorry,
But it's not a vote laughable for him. It's a vote against her. When she says
it's
she's
a vote
the most,
against her.
When she says, I'm taking responsibility for the email thing, what does that mean? Don't just say that. Like, tell us how you're taking responsibility. Because from my world, a top secret clearance holding person, if you've compromised TS, either intentionally or unintentionally, you've committed a federal felony type offense.
Yep.
And if you're going to be accountable and you're going to get away with it, at least have the character to say, this investigation may turn out to be in some way influencing the presidential race. I should pull out of this race and allow somebody else who doesn't have this over them.
What did she do?
Well, before we get too much into what she did, let's keep in mind that the Bush administration had their own little email problem too.
Yeah, but that can be investigated. That's Congress needs to investigate.
But and they did not investigate it. The Democratic Party, they let it go. And the Democratic Party shows up to play a game of croquet while the Republicans are playing rugby.
Right.
So,
yep.
This is
once again, the Republicans do a great job at winning.
Yes.
Yeah.
They know
this
how
is
to
why
win.
I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I actually take the advice that our best founding father, George Washington, gave us when he left the office of the presidency. He said, do not stick with your factions. Yes. Don't form parties. And you know what we did as soon as he left? We formed parties.
Right. Yep.
We, and party loyalty is one thing, but it also puts blinders on people.
We have proven that we will not listen to the presidents when they leave office. When Eisenhower said, watch that military-industrial complex from a 5-star general, we're like, no, we like it. We want more of it. Hey, is it fair for us? I think we need to temper our expectations, too, of Donald Trump. As smart or as idiot he is, he's got an impossible job now. When President Obama came in, he came in as honestly a bit of a rube to the process, and he got corrected real quick. And the learning curve for anybody, especially guys like Donald Trump and President Obama who don't have a powerful executive branch background, there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be that, you shouldn't have bowed to this world leader. You shouldn't have done these things. Those things are going to happen for Donald Trump.
Well, I can certainly hear the reconciliation tone in your voice. But man, Obama never got a break, man.
Never.
And we don't need to set the bar super low for the orange man here, because I mean, for crying out loud, this guy, Pete, you got a clearance, I got a clearance. How much of your financial information did you have to disclose to get that clearance?
All of it.
All of it. And you know why? Because that is leverage that somebody could potentially have over you.
Yes.
Here we have the commander-in-chief. Oh, and by the way, you want to talk about transparency? We got financial records on Hillary Clinton going back to the 70s, right? But yet we still don't know who has leverage over Donald Trump. We also don't know if he's paid his fair share in taxes. And when I say fair share is you got to pay your defense tab and you got to pay your VA bill, right? When you don't pay your taxes, and I can even give him a pass on valuing his properties one way at one level for the federal government and then devaluing his properties for the local government. Even though that robs schools of their funding, it takes away money from the local revenues that the state and local government need to take in. But I just cannot forgive this man for not releasing his taxes, knowing what I had to release just to get a security clearance. I don't know who has leverage over the president-elect. But you know what? A lot of people didn't seem to have a problem with that. And that's one thing that bothers me. That even bothers me more than his alleged racism, grabbing him by the pussy and all that stuff. Right?
Yeah, we certainly didn't hold him to the same level of scrutiny, or the folks who voted for him.
Yeah.
I don't know who has leverage over him. You know,
Yeah.
I suspect it's the Russians because he really seems to like Putin and they really seem to like him.
Yep.
You know,
They are
so
warm.
yeah. And boy, I'm not saying we need to have good relations with Russia, but man, who has financial leverage over this guy?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a walking like conflict of interest.
Yeah.
You know,
And Donald Trump may be playing rugby with the Republicans, but the Russians are playing MMA, and they're DDTing
Yeah.
people left and right.
yeah. No, the Russians are playing rugby with knives.
Yeah,
So-
they are playing the game at a different level, and thus far, our last administration has kind of played the middle. That's sort of what we do, is try to find that middle ground and compromise. We'll fly in some robots and kill people, but we're not going to put a lot of people on the ground, and that
Well,
has kind of
Obama's-
pushed things along.
It goes back to what you said is he didn't have executive experience. He did have a fair amount of political experience, more so than the right ever gave him credit for. One of the biggest complaints about Barack Obama was he doesn't have any political experience. I don't hear anybody on the right saying that about Donald Trump, who has zero political experience. You know?
Well,
So-
if we've learned anything about our presidents is that you can have the best resume ever. You probably see George H.W. Bush, George Bush the Elder, had maybe the best presidential resume coming in. It's really hard to be more qualified than that guy, and he's a middling president. You know, you have Herbert Hoover, who was a great businessman, not a good president. You have George Washington, great businessman, great president.
Great military man, too.
Right.
Yeah, you just don't know.
And timing plays into it. And maybe Herbert Hoover could have been a great president in a different time. Maybe George W. Bush would have been a better president as not a wartime president. Like if he was a status quo kind of president, like he was sort of elected to be. Maybe he could have been better, but timing is unfair to these guys, and it smacks them around. So what's your sense of Donald Trump's timing as president? Is he in a time where his particular skills may play out?
Well, we'll see. I mean, you know, the
let's
economy.
God,
Yeah.
No kidding.
Well, you know, our military's not in shambles like he told people it was. You know, our economy's not doing that bad. I mean, unemployment's less than 5%. The stock market is doing well. The stock market ain't the real economy, though. But here's the other thing. I don't think he's going to be able to bring back all these manufacturing jobs. And even if he does, he's not going to bring them back at the rate of pay that people are expecting.
Yeah, that
Don't
horse has
forget,
left the barn.
Yeah.
This
They
is
sold that barn. That barn
The
is now
global-
a Cracker Barrel.
It's a
The
it's a
economy
Cracker Barrel
has-
that's on a lease
Yes.
from somewhere
Yeah.
in China.
Right, exactly.
The economy has changed, and we need to accept that. But we also need to hold. This is where local politics comes into place. State legislatures need to be adjusting accordingly and diversifying their economies. And this ain't just all the president, right? And here's another thing. This is the man who said in a debate, wages are too high. Okay, I'm sorry. I have a problem with that, especially since I live paycheck to paycheck and my wages are not too high, right? So can he step
And
up?
you are a doctor.
Can he step up? Yeah, and I've got a PhD in political science.
So he can't help anybody.
Right.
So, oh no, well he can, but he can. Yeah, I can't help you. I can't help you. I can't help you medically, and I could really fuck with your mind if you let me. So the thing is, though, we're going to have to wait and see. You know, we're going to get massive, awesome tax breaks, but they're going to be really awesome if you're already wealthy. And I've not yet been convinced since Reagan and since George W. Bush. I'm not convinced that this trickle-down stuff works. What I am convinced is we're going to get more into debt. We're going to spend more federal money.
That's a kind way of saying we all should be convinced that the shit doesn't work because the
No.
shit doesn't work.
I'm not convinced that it does.
Yeah.
Right? So what happens is the wealthy are going to get more wealthy. If they don't, you know, and it's up to the wealthy people to give us all jobs, that's bullshit. You know who makes jobs? That plumber who had to come to my house because the drain was clogged, you know? That construction worker that I'm trying to get to come over and do a little bit of work on my house, that's where the jobs are,
Yeah.
you know? So it ain't just big Walmart making money. We like to talk about, you know, the distribution of wealth and, you know, Democrats are trying to redistribute wealth. Well, what about the redistribution of wealth upward? You know, that's what I'm concerned about. And that's what I don't think this particular President-elect Trump, that's what I don't think he's going to change or do anything about. You know, We really make it easy for rich people to keep their money. But let's also keep in mind that's how this country was founded. I hear a lot of talk of America's becoming an oligarchy. I want to grab people by the throat when they say that, because we already are an oligarchy.
Yes. Always have been.
Yes.
That's what we were founded as, right? So if we don't strengthen workers' rights and we don't protect consumers, none of us are going to have any money to buy anything, So meanwhile, you're going to have a bunch more Flint, Michigans that are going to happen across the United States,
Yep.
This big infrastructure plan Donald Trump has. You know what his infrastructure plan is? He talked about it months ago and nobody called him on it. It's called toll roads. It's called privatization of your highways, And how is that going to help consumers? We're going to get a little bit of tax break, but boy, what kind of services that the government actually provides for us? Clean air, clean water, suitable roads so we can conduct our businesses, so we can get to school and get ourselves educated. I just feel that the middle class is about to get squeezed even more than we already are squeezed.
Yeah, he's absolutely said that he's going to make all of those things not be the responsibility of government. We really value that you're on our show, Dr. Ledet. We're also respectful of your time. I want to close by saying, here is the bright side for me with Donald Trump. He's given us a first lady whose titties we all can go see online.
That's right. Go online until he gets it censored.
And she's going to be all about gay rights, because the other thing we can see online is her face in somebody's snatch.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
And my silver lining is that this gives us all a chance to say, not on my watch, God damn it, and get involved a little bit and hit those 3 marks to be a good democratic citizen. Get involved, get informed, and God damn it, try to be a little bit kinder to one another and listen for a change. So that's my challenge to everybody else. If you want to do something, I'm glad to jump on board with you. I'll sign any petition. I'll write any letter. Let's do it. Let's speak back to our leaders.
Leave it to Pete. I'm just fucking hijacking the last word. Leave it to Pete to say the sensible thing and the positive thing, and leave it to me to use the word snatch. Thanks, Dr. Rich.
No problem, guys. Good chatting with you.